Rapa Nui, commonly known as Easter Island, is a Chilean island located in the southeastern Pacific Ocean in the Polynesian Triangle. Around 700 to 800 CE, Rapa Nui was settled by seafarers of the Marquesian Islands, 2,000 miles west of Rapa Nui. Some believe that South Americans also integrated with the Polynesians. Polynesians were able to travel the ocean with an outrigger canoe, using wayfinding techniques. The navigator would stay awake for almost the whole voyage, using stars as a compass to align their canoe with the destination. Marquesian beliefs and culture were brought to Rapa Nui when they had settled, but as centuries passed, Rapa Nui formed their own unique culture. Rapa Nui's culture is different from other Polynesian islands because it is one of the most difficult islands to sail to in eastern Polynesia. Firstly, Rapa Nui is a lone island in the open ocean, far away from other landmasses. Secondly, Rapa Nui lies windward to the easterly trade winds, so the voyage back to other Polynesian islands would be extremely difficult. An important aspect of their history is the event of an ecological decline, since it reshaped their beliefs. The most scientific hypothesis is there is not much vegetation on the island to begin with, and the soil lacked nutrients. As islanders cut down trees, there is also the invasive Polynesian rat destroying the growth of palms. They devoured the palm roots and seeds. The ecosystem of the island was severely damaged as many species of plants and birds could no longer inhabit the island. Although there was much less to eat, the Rapa Nui people continued to grow their food in enriched rock gardens and even ate rats as a source of protein. The first contact with Europeans was with the Dutch on Easter, hence the name Easter Island. This is the beginning of Rapa Nui's true downfall. On 1862, Peruvian slave raiders enslaved 15,000 natives, half the population. A year later, only 100 slaves were returned to the island. These survivors introduced smallpox to the rest of the population. With this, the population declined to 111 natives. Clan wars began, fighting over the land of the deceased. On top of that, Christian and Roman Catholic Europeans assimilated their religion. Onto their ancient religion. The creation story. In the beginning there was an egg, which hatched a man with the head of a bird. He is Makemake, the god of fertility. He created the world with his mana, his power. After he created the world, Makemake felt alone. He looked at his reflection in the water. It occurred to him to make a man in his image, so he would not be so lonely. Makemake tried fertilizing stones, but it didn't form anything. He fertilized the water, but it created fish. Lastly, he fertilized clay, and a man was born. Makemake has another realization. The man he created was as lonely as he was. So he fertilized the man's left rib, and a woman was born. Makemake appoints a divine chief on earth to communicate with him about worldly matters. The king of Rapa Nui, a descendant of the gods, and therefore has the mana of Makemake. The ancestor cult. The ancestor cult has much to do with funerary ceremonies. To explain, when someone died, the deceased was wrapped in vegetable fabric and was placed on a platform to decompose, taking 1 to 2 years. During this process, the Rapa Nui believed the spirit of the deceased would stay with their families before leaving to the spirit world and could be called for help. The people honored the deceased with a large feast, singing and dancing. The bones of the common people were placed in a stone chamber with their ancestors. The bones of people with importance, like tribe leaders, were stored in a special platform called the anu, close to the village. The ritual is finalized by carving a moai in their image. The role of the moai was to preserve the mana of the deceased. To them, the ancestral spirits were the guardians of the people and the island. They also believed they have much to do with fertility, having an influence on the migration of birds and fish, the plants that grow, the richness of the soil, and the population. The Rapa Nui tribes coexisted peacefully to carve these statues. Most were carved at Ranu Raku Quarry from volcanic rock. They are transported down the quarry with ropes and levers and were moved with a wooden sled to an anu platform where the bones of important people are stored. Once on the anu, it is given eyes and a pukao, a type of hat used to symbolize hair. Once everything is finalized, the moai can give their mana to the island. The moai are placed along the coast facing inland, although 7 moai face the ocean towards the west, representing where they had came from. These colossal carvings average 10 to 12 metric tons and average 13 feet. The moai's size increased over time because tribes competed to make the biggest moai. But recall the ecological decline. The lack of resources caused this practice to eventually stop in the 18th century. The islanders feuded over the importance of moai. Many were toppled and destroyed in the conflict. The islanders believed the ancestor spirits had forsaken them. As a solution to this conflict, a new religious cult took its place, the Birdman cult. The Rapa Nui people stopped worshipping the ancestral cult. They instead only worshipped Makemake. The seabird is the totem of this cult because it is symbolic of Makemake being half bird, half man. The most important practice of the Birdman cult is the Birdman ceremony. Each year, the chief of each tribe would choose a contestant. They compete in an egg hunt race at Orongo. The contestants must scale down the side of Orongo Cliff, swim in shark-infested waters to an islet where seabirds lay their eggs. The first to return to Orongo with an egg and a pouch wrapped around their forehead is the winner and is named Birdman of the Year. He becomes the embodiment of Makemake, so he can communicate with the gods. His tribe becomes the political leader of all tribes. In a ceremony, he would shave his hair, his eyebrows, and even his eyelashes, and in place he would receive red spiritual markings. He would live in seclusion from others, and is not allowed to cut his nails or bathe. The benefit of winning is his tribe would get priority of resources and would receive gifts. The worldview of ancient Rapa Nui states the problem with human life is security. With no large-scale agriculture or animal farming, their survival is dependent on the givings of nature. Things like the migration of birds and fish, good weather for plants, and disasters have a great impact on the security of the people. For them, they believe natural occurrences are controlled by the gods. For example, the Moai cult ended because of ecological decline, but in their worldview, the ecological decline was caused because the ancestral gods had forsaken the island. Because their security lies in the gods' hands, the solution to the problem is cultivating mana, the power of the creator, through rituals and practices. The central theme of both the ancestor and Birdman cult is harnessing the mana, which were thought to bring security to the people and the island. According to Albert Schweitzer's criteria for an acceptable worldview, a worldview must be rational, ethical, and optimistic. Their worldview is not rational, which is likely because their island was so isolated from the rest of humanity. A lot of the things they did were counterintuitive, like putting their time and resources into carving moai in the life-threatening Birdman ceremony. Although these feats are amazing, they are irrational. Their worldview is ethical. In their worldview, right and wrong is governed by spiritual beliefs. In their culture, they have the word taboo, which is a prohibition and precepts that govern life and determines what is sacred. For example, taboo determines things like what area you can fish in and even when you can cut your hair. Following taboo forms a spiritual connection with the gods, so if you go against taboo, the gods will no longer protect you. Once again, mana plays a great role. Almost all spiritual practices connect to what is thought to bring mana to the island. Taboo and mana are somewhat the two laws that govern ancient Rapa Nui. Their worldview is optimistic. They value life through their many rituals and practices. In their culture, there are rituals to celebrate each stage of life, from birth to adolescence, adulthood, and to death. For example, at 8 years old, they would receive their first tattoos on their legs. At adolescence, boys and girls underwent a coming-of-age ceremony. Their bodies were decorated with red and white paint and ornaments. They were sent to Motu Nui, a small island facing Orongo, where they learned how to survive on their own. Then after, they were taught sacred knowledge and skills from the elders and teachers. At death, they have lengthy funerary ceremonies. They have a ceremonial way to treat the remains of the deceased, and they celebrated the dead. And like said earlier, they built moai to honor the great ancestors. These rituals show how they have a great appreciation for life. According to Schweitzer's criteria for a good worldview, Rapa Nui fails, but I still think it's an interesting topic to learn about.